10. The fighter plane. In August 1942, a fierce battle was waged above the skies of the Solomon Islands. American Wildcats took on Japanese Zero fighter planes in a flash of fire and steel. In the middle of this aerial assault, two pilots faced each other. James Pug Sutherland flew his Grumman F-4F Wildcat with its stocky chassis painted in deep sky blue. The Wildcat was a strong aircraft, with great protection for its pilot and loaded up with superior firepower. Facing him was Saburo Sakai in his Mitsubishi A6M2. Nicknamed the Zero, what this plane lacked in strength it made up for in sheer speed and agility. However, this came at a cost. In order to be able to perform in this way, the Zero lacked protection for both its pilot and, most importantly, its fuel containers, which could prove both deadly and very explosive. This battle became known as the dogfight over Guadalcanal. 56 years later, deep in the jungle, the wreckage of Sutherland's F-4F Wildcat was found by an island native exactly where it had fallen following the epic battle. The plane lays in pieces in a crater near an extinct volcano, with bullet holes on the engine and by the tip of the propeller. But what happened to its pilot? Miraculously, Sutherland survived. He managed to eject from his aircraft before it crashed to the ground. After a 3-day walk through the jungle, he made it to safety. Saburo Sakai would go on to be heralded as one of Japan's greatest aces. 9. The Lost City of the Monkey God. In 2012, researchers discovered the ruins of an ancient city nestled deep within Honduras's Mosquitia rainforest. Using LiDAR technology, they were able to determine the presence of lost ruins and set out to explore the site. It was a perilous trek in an area controlled by drug cartels and all kinds of dangerous creatures. However, one of the biggest dangers came from the ancient city itself. The city had begun to crumble away over time, but statues and fragments of an earthen pyramid remained. Stone jars had been ritually broken to release the spirits housed inside, as was the custom when being buried in a grave. Based on the quality of these items, they would likely have belonged to a great civilization. And by the sheer number of the jars that archaeologists found, and given their age, it's likely that the graves housed the majority of the city's citizens. But what happened to the people that lived here? There are many reasons why heading to this jungle is a bad idea. Some natives believe that the place is sacred and a haven for indigenous gods from each of the 7 indigenous nations who'd fled when Europeans arrived 500 years before. If you got there and couldn't talk to each one in their own language, you were never allowed to leave. The other reason is a lot more sinister and tells us what likely happened to the people of this city. As research explorers returned from the jungle, more than half of the crew fell ill. But this wasn't just a simple cold. Instead, the team had contracted a flesh-eating parasite from the city, which began to eat at their faces, causing their nose and lips to decay. Thankfully, modern medicine and care meant that they were able to be treated. But long ago, the people that once lived in the city didn't have the kind of access to life-saving treatments that we do today. Curiously, this particular type of parasite seemed to be unique to only this area. Could it be an ancient curse? Let us know what you think in the comments. 8. The secret Nazi hideout. Deep in the jungles of Argentina, in the Teucuare Park, archaeologists stumbled upon the ruins of a secret World War II hideout. It had thick, imposing walls that had stood the test of time, and its location was almost completely inaccessible, meaning whoever had been hiding there definitely didn't want to be found. The discovery of Nazi-era coins that were minted in the 1930s and 40s, and pottery with German markings, told researchers that this location was likely a covert settlement for fleeing Nazi officials. Although they found these items, it appears unlikely that this site was ever actually used to house Nazi fugitives escaping the punishment for their defeat in 1945. This was due to the fact that the Argentinian government at the time allowed them to freely settle in their towns and cities. Despite this, many hideouts like this still exist, as part of a plan at the time to create ways for senior Nazis to escape, often hidden in remote places that people would never think to look. 7. The stone spheres of Costa Rica. In the early 1930s, bananas were in high demand, and the United Fruit Company needed more space for their banana plantations to meet this demand. They began to clear a section of the jungle in Costa Rica, only to make a curious discovery. The workers discovered over 300 stone spheres, some small and some reaching 6 or 7 feet, 1.8 to 2.1 meters in diameter. Remarkably, the stones were completely smooth and round. Instead of investigating the stones, the fruit company decided to simply move them out of the way. Some were even shipped off to become garden ornaments. Little did they know that they were moving one of the jungle's ancient mysteries. But how did the stones get there? And who or what made them? Further studies of the stones concluded that they'd been made by the Dikwi culture and were likely over 2,000 years old. They were carved using sharp pieces of stone to chip away at the rock until they were perfectly spherical, a task that must have taken a tremendous amount of patience and work. But what were the stones used for? Were they compasses? Were they used as burial monuments for ancient rulers? Did the ancient Dikwi use them to chart the stars? The truth is, we really don't know. What do you think the stones were used for? Let us know in the comments below. 6. The Boiling River. There are all kinds of incredible places you can go swimming around the world, from sparkling beaches to tranquil cave pools. However, there's one river in the Amazon rainforest where you definitely would not like to take a dip. Known in its native Peru as Shane Timpishka, which means boiled by the heat of the sun, ancient legend states that the waters were heated up by the power of a serpent spirit named Yakumama. Yakumama must have done a really good job, as the water in this river reaches a staggering 200 degrees and is capable of boiling alive anyone or anything unfortunate enough to fall into its depths. The water steams and bubbles, but what actually makes it into the world's most dangerous jacuzzi? If you thought it was volcanic, you'd be wrong. The nearest volcano is over 400 miles, 644 kilometers away. The river gets its scalding temperature from hot springs heated by faults in the earth. Water seeps down into the cracks, gets heated up by the Earth's core, and then shoots back up to the surface. Probably best to stick to the local pool. 5. Cambodia's underground cities. Although the lush, tropical rainforests in Cambodia may appear to be normal, there's something rather huge lurking beneath its surface. Not so far from the infamous Angkor Wat Temple, scientists and archaeologists use LiDAR technology to scan the ground with lasers to see what's hidden beneath. Normally, you might expect to find a small settlement or two, but they discovered something staggering. Multiple underground cities that were between 900 and 1,400 years old. These weren't small settlements either. A lot of them rival the size of Cambodia's capital city, Phnom Penh. Scientists now believe that this would have made the Khmer Empire one of the largest on Earth. These cities were also remarkably high-tech, with water system technology that was unheard of for the time. The population of these settlements was immense, with researchers believing that about 1 million people would have lived within this massive network of streets and buildings. This would have made it one of the largest cities at its peak in the 1200s. 4. Ancient artwork in Borneo. What would Leonardo da Vinci have painted if he was a caveman? If the deep jungle in Borneo is anything to go by, he'd probably be painting a lot of cows. In the 1990s, a group of archaeologists made their way through the dense rainforest, climbing down limestone cliffs in a move even Indiana Jones would be jealous of. They did this to access a wide range of caves hidden in the rock, which led to some exciting discoveries. Inside, they found hand stencils left from early ancestors on the walls and ceilings. But the key finds were the actual paintings that had required more than just slapping your hand on the wall. The cavemen had drawn various animals, including one of an ancestor to the modern-day cow. It's surprisingly well drawn, with clear features, curved horns, and in a rich brown color. So the original artist must have been quite good. The cow artwork, otherwise known as a banteng, was dated to be at least 40,000 years old. This means that the first real artistic muse wasn't a pretty woman, but a jungle cow. 3. The Stone Head of Guatemala. In the 1950s, explorers found a mysterious stone head deep within the jungle of Guatemala. There are plenty of stone heads around the world, such as the Easter Island statues, but there was something different about this one. The head was about the size of 5 cars stacked on top of one another, but it wasn't the size that made it strange. The stone head had thin lips, a large nose, and fine features, and was tilted towards the sky. Given that the statue was found in Guatemala, it was odd that it more closely resembled a Caucasian face than that of the native people. Studies as to why this head looked so different from the people thought to be in the area at the time have become all but impossible. Sadly, in the 1980s when scientists went back to check on the statue, they found it had been vandalized by revolutionaries, and almost none of its strange features remained. Since then, there have been many theories as to the head's existence. Some people believe it was from alien contact, others an unknown civilization we didn't know existed. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. 2. The stinkiest flower in the world. A lot of us like to buy flowers for people that we care about. However, some of the flowers you can find in the jungle would be more suited as a bouquet for your worst enemy. Found in Borneo, the Rafflesia arnoldi, that's its scientific name, is the largest flower in the world, reaching almost 3 feet, 1 meter across. It has bright red, thick petals with white bumps on them, and the center of the flower is a deep hollow, with thick pollen-bearing stamen at the bottom. You might think that gifting the largest flower in the world to someone would be the biggest romantic gesture there is, but you would be sorely mistaken. See, the common name for this flower says it all: the stinking corpse lily. It's also known as the monster flower due to both its size and smell. When the stinking corpse lily blooms, the stench is unbearable. The plant gives off the smell of rotting flesh, which is enough to make anyone's eyes water. Instead of creating this unique aroma to keep things away from it, this plant gives off this particular scent in the hope of attracting pollinators. Just goes to show that even if you stink to high heaven, someone or something is still gonna love you. 1. The mysterious earth rings of the Amazon. Throughout remote areas of the Amazon, such as in Bolivia and Brazil, scientists have discovered strange ditches and raised structures. Some of them are straight, some are rectangular, while others form massive circles in the ground. The sheer size of some of these ditches and rings is staggering. Most can easily be seen from the air, while others are 16 feet, 4.8 meters deep in places. But what exactly are they, and how did they get there? The answer to this question is rather surprising. You might think, based on other entries in this video, that the Earth circles were made by jungle tribes as part of some kind of ritual, and that's where you'd be wrong. In fact, when these rings were made, there wasn't even a jungle there at all. The circles were likely made around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and the landscape wouldn't have looked as it does now. Experts believe that the rainforest would have looked more like the African savanna, with large grasslands and a much drier climate. As time went on, the ecosystem changed, and more trees began to sprout up to form the jungle that we know today. Scientists have come up with multiple theories as to why the ditches were built, such as for drainage or religious ceremonies. Others suggest that it could be a natural barrier as the trees grew around them. Either way, it's interesting to learn that the rainforest didn't even exist at the same time that the ancient Egyptians were around. The jungle is a mysterious place, as our list shows, where you can find anything from a fighter plane to a lost city.
The Douglas SB Dauntless, a plane that flew into a steep dive toward its target, was notorious for delivering fatal blows to Japanese fleet carriers in June 1942 during the Battle of Midway. Navy pilot Lieutenant Charles Ford II was in a training exercise in 1944 when the Dauntless crashed and was recovered from the water 50 years later. He was attempting to land the very young Dauntless, a short 4 months old, on the training carrier known as the USS Wolverine. He underestimated himself and wasn't quick enough on his approach, which resulted in the plane striking the lake in a nearly perfect vertical position. Luck was on Ford's side that day. He walked away from the crash with deep cuts to his forehead. It wasn't until 1994 that the operation to remove the naval aircraft began. The Dauntless was found in 177 feet of water sitting completely upright at the bottom of the lake. It is reported that the deep cold conditions helped preserve the plane rather well. Number 9. Elongated Skull found in underwater cave. Recently, at the bottom of a water-filled cavern in Mexico, archaeologists have discovered a number of human skulls, which is causing us to second-guess what we think we know about early Americans in North America. According to a study done by the State University of Ohio, the skulls belonged to people who lived 9,000 to 13,000 years ago, well before the caves were filled with water. The structure and shape of the skulls were studied by the researchers with the hopes of learning more about these people who lived in these caves so long ago. The oldest skull bore close similarities to modern Native Americans that lived in Greenland and Alaska, while the second oldest skull could easily be compared to the European populations. The first Americans were much more complex, much more diverse than we thought, Mark Cuba, co-lead author of the study and professor of anthropology at The Ohio State University, said in a statement. Number 8. The Mystery of Foss Lake. A 42-year-old case of missing people came back into the limelight when 2 cars were found on September 17, 2013, submerged in Foss Lake, Custer County, Oklahoma. Between both vehicles found, skeletal remains of 6 bodies were discovered. A 1969 Chevrolet Camaro belonging to young man Johnny Williams, 16, was first discovered, and it was confirmed that the other 2 bodies belonged to Leah Gale Johnson, 18, and Thomas Michael Rios, also 18. It was reported that the 3 were on their way to attend a high school football game in the next town over. The second car was a 50s model Chevrolet, but inside were the bodies of 3 adults. The medical examiner had confirmed the bodies belonged to John Alva Porter, 69, Nora Marie Duncan, 58, and Cleburne Hammock, 52. It was reported by the Oklahoman that 2 of the 3 were reported missing in 1969, a year before the 3 teenagers went missing. As with any mystery, especially with people vanishing, speculation is bound to occur. especially in small-town Sayre, Oklahoma. Being it was the 70s, the talk amongst the townspeople was that the young people were involved in counterculture or perhaps a drug smuggling ring. Yet according to the discovery, both of the accidents proved that there was no one else involved. They were not murdered. All 6 of them died from drowning, and the 2 accidents, which happened a year apart, had nothing to do with each other. Jimmy Williams, brother of Johnny Williams, who was a mere 12 years old at the time, does believe that foul play was involved during the time of the accident. "I think they came across bad people," he told a reporter for the Oklahoman. Number 7. Long-lost locomotives. What started as a regular day for charter boat captain Paul Hepler mapping out the ocean floor ended up being somewhat of a unique day after stumbling across 2 perfectly preserved rare locomotives nearly 90 feet down. In New Jersey in 1985, it was discovered that the trains were Planet Class 222T models, which are considered to be one of the few oldest steam trains that were built in the United States. No one knew how they got there because there's nothing on record of them even disappearing. Dozens and dozens of hours of research were poured into the mysteries of the underwater train yard, but to this day it remains a mystery, mostly because there's no record of these 2 locomotives ever being built in the first place. Divers and archaeologists alike have had their speculations as to what happened, with ideas ranging from them being taken from Boston to the mid-Atlantic when a storm ensued 5 miles off the coast of Long Beach, New Jersey. In the storm, the locomotives were speculated to have either fallen off the barge accidentally or they were purposely shoved off to make the load weigh less, getting rid of unnecessary materials to prevent the ship from going down if the storm happened to get worse. Despite how they got to the bottom of the ocean, it's pretty neat to think that there were 2 locomotives so perfectly well preserved, even after an estimated 160 years. Number 6. Elusive glass octopus. In 2021, an underwater robot finally captured footage of what is known as a glass octopus, a cephalopod that is widely recognized as elusive and almost impossible to capture on film. It was first discovered over 100 years ago, with records indicating its first sighting in 1918. The glass octopus has a tiny body that doesn't ever reach past 17 inches and weighs merely an ounce or 2. Aside from its eyes, digestive tract, and optic nerves, the octopus is entirely transparent. And for good reason. Without this defense mechanism, it wouldn't be safe from its predators, and it also wouldn't be able to sneak up on prey. Due to how deep it lives in the ocean and how tiny it is, sightings are very rare. Thanks to the robot Sebastian, who was assigned the task of going to the ocean floor during the 34-day expedition aboard the Schmidt Ocean Institute's research vessel, he was able to catch not only 1 but 2 sightings of this beautiful and rare creature. On top of these sightings while on the ship, scientists in attendance were able to study the behavior and immune systems of coral and sponges, which could amazingly and miraculously improve medical research. Amazing proof that there's more out there than our brains can comprehend. Number 5. Submerged forest. Just as prehistoric humans started making their way out of Africa, cypress trees started to grow on the banks near a river by the Gulf of Mexico. As the years passed and the trees got older, they eventually started to fall and at last were buried in the sediment. As climatic temperatures increased, sea levels rose, covering the remains of what was left of the forest. Interestingly enough, scientists have recently uncovered the forest and have said that its contents may be able to create new medicines and ultimately save lives. Before this discovery, the forest remained untouched for thousands of years. Hurricane Ivan hit the Gulf's coast in 2004 and swept up the seabed, revealing the near-perfect entombed forest. Wood naturally decomposed in water, but because it was so heavily buried in sediments, oxygen and shipworms were unable to do their damage. It really looked like something that you could have picked up from today. It still had bark on it. It still had all the coloration on the inside. It was just locked away for 60,000 years, said one of the divers, Brian Helmuth, a professor of marine and environmental sciences at Northeastern University. Number 4. The Vasa Shipwreck. Not too far from the deck, the Vasa set sail in March 1627 and was on her way to her maiden voyage. Sadly, after departing, heavy winds toppled her over, causing her to sink almost immediately. Most of the bronze cannons were salvaged in the 17th century, and the Vasa was not seen again until 1950 when it was discovered again in a shipping area located in Stockholm Harbor. By 1961, the ship was salvaged with a shockingly large intact hull. During that time, the remains of at least 15 people were recovered, along with thousands of artifacts in and around the hull. Amongst the items were tools, cannons, cutlery, weapons, clothes, food, coins, drinks, and 6 of the 10 sails belonging to the ship. This key discovery gave insight into shipbuilding techniques, naval warfare, and simple everyday life in 17th century Sweden. After being discovered, archaeologists were able to recover the Vasa, and she now sits at home in her museum in Sweden, where she receives routine care and monitoring. Research is continually done on how to preserve her. Number 3. Rare deep-sea squid. It is widely known that the sea and ocean are very mysterious and alluring because there's so much down there that no one knows about and has yet to be discovered. Even with how advanced technology is, the grand majority remains untouched. Earlier this year, a team of subsea explorers went on the deepest dive of a lifetime in the hopes of finding a shipwreck that sank during an extremely intense naval battle in 1944. A journey that made headline news. It was discovered that the USS Johnston was amazingly and perfectly well preserved, with its guns reportedly still pointing in the direction of the enemy by a team from the Caledon Oceanic. Just a few days before the explorers' trip, however, they ended up diving to a different part of the seafloor, just a few kilometers away from the ship. They ended up finding something as equally interesting, if not more. A deep-sea researcher named Alan Jamieson from the University of Western Australia sat and watched frame after frame of the footage provided by the divers. After what seemed like forever, he finally found a blurry form, yet claimed to be recognized as a squid just cruising above the seabed. 20,000 feet below the surface of the sea. That's roughly 1.5 kilometers deeper than any squid has ever swum before. Jamieson provided the footage to a zoologist friend, and he confirmed the footage to be that of a magnapinidae, which are the most mysterious squid in the entire world. They were described as weird creatures with very long, skinny arms that resemble spaghetti noodles. Squid are top hunters, and so their existence this deep in the water suggests that there's life down there far more than we can imagine there to be. Number 2. Water ghosts. It seems every small town has a spooky ghost story. Lake Lanier, which is located in the foothills of the northern Georgia mountains, is no exception. Some locals have claimed mysterious arms reach out from the watery depths, and allegedly angry spirits call people home to submerged graves. An alarming 200 people have died in drownings and boating accidents since 1994. The lake is well known as a fun spot for swimming and water sports. The lake's reputation comes with a past. Before it became a lake, it was a lush and thriving community and had cute names such as Castleberry Bottom. Army Corps of Engineers decided they wanted to create a lake in the fertile region to provide power and water. They offered to pay locals to relocate so they could get the job done, but many people refused to give up their land, which often went back generations in their family and had sentimental value that they couldn't put a price on. Sadly, some residents felt they had their hands tied behind their backs and accepted the offer. Construction started in 1956, and residents couldn't do much other than watch water rise above their homes. Workers did try to move and mark graves that they were able to, but some were likely left untouched, resulting in them going underwater. Other than creepy paranormal encounters, locals have also reported feeling objects, yet not seeing them. It's also said that there have been sightings of very large fish that resemble the size of a car. And most importantly, and not so surprisingly, remains from the unmarked graves would turn up pretty often. Number 1. Ancient Roman medication. A ship called the Relito del Pocino sank over 2,000 years ago off the coast of Tuscany, Italy. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that an Italian archaeology team discovered the ship. Surprisingly, its contents did not include money, jewels, or gold. What was found instead rather were multiple tin cans full of perfectly preserved medication, thought to be eye medication for the ancient Romans. This discovery was said to give insight into the development of medicine over the centuries. Also inside the tins sat beeswax, pine resin, starch, and even olive oil. Starch was commonly used for cosmetics, olive oil was used for perfumes, and pine resin was used to prevent the olive oil from spoiling. The study was able to provide key information on ancient medical and pharmaceutical practices, as well as the development of pharmacology and medicine over the centuries.
10. A reef taller than the Empire State Building. A team of Australian scientists on board the Schmidt Ocean Institute's exploration ship Falcor was charting the northern Great Barrier Reef seafloor when they accidentally found a gigantic coral reef, over 1,640 feet, 500 meters tall. That's taller than the Empire State Building. This new discovery is the first of its kind in over 120 years. It's known as a detached reef. The new coral mast is one of 8 that scientists know of in the region. These naturally formed structures deliver important habitats for beings like turtles and sharks, which travel throughout the deep waters neighboring the Great Barrier Reef. The team plotted the detached reef, finding a diversity of life forms flourishing in the ecosystem. They collected samples of rock, sediments, and some organisms that will be sent to labs for analysis. While more specifics about this reef will probably develop, taxonomists reviewing the images and video have already identified numerous new fish species. Wendy Schmidt, the co-founder of the Schmidt Ocean Institute, stated in a press release that the finding is part of a revolution in marine biology. Thanks to new technologies that work as our eyes, ears, and hands in the deep ocean, we have the capacity to explore like never before. 9. Sunken Sherman tanks. During World War II, the Nazis sank several cargo ships that were carrying US Sherman tanks. Since then, a few of the wrecks have been rediscovered, including the SS Empire Heritage. Originally named the Tafelberg, the 508-foot-long, 155-meter steamer was torpedoed 15 miles, 24 kilometers off the Northern Irish coast in September 1944. She took 113 lives with her to the ocean floor. The wreck was found 220 feet, 67 meters below the waves in 2014, along with several M4A176W Sherman tanks. This medium-sized model was among the first tanks to serve in combat under the US military. In early 1945, the SS Thomas Donaldson left Scotland as part of a 26-ship convoy bound for Russia's Kola Peninsula. But the vessel was shot down by a German U-boat just 20 miles, 32 kilometers from its destination, and it took several Sherman tanks down with it. One tank was brought to the surface in 2014, and there are reportedly at least 2 more with the wreck that could be recovered. 8. Strange dinosaur. Around 75 million years ago, an armored dinosaur with a strange weaponized tail roamed what is now South America's Patagonia region. The 6.5-foot, 2-meter Cretaceous creature, dubbed Stegosaurus elengasson, was a herbivorous dinosaur called an ankylosaur. It looked somewhat like a stegosaurus, other than its tail, which scientists have likened to an extremely flat sword or an Aztec club called Macoahuitl. The deadly appendage is unlike any other dinosaur tail ever seen. It was short for a dinosaur's tail, but functioned rather effectively as a weapon. The newly described specimen died near a river, where it may have been sucked into the ground by quicksand. The creature's fossils show ankylosaurs evolved much differently in different parts of the world after the supercontinent Pangaea broke up around 200 million years ago. The event split Pangaea into 2 separate land masses, the southerly supercontinent Gondwana and Laurasia, which sat largely in the northern hemisphere. Very few ankylosaurs have been found in the region that once encompassed southern Gondwana, and the ones that have differed greatly from their neighbors to the north. They were smaller, with thinner legs and lighter armor, according to lead study author Sergio Soto Acuna, who spoke with CNN about the discovery. 7. World's first autonomous cargo ship. News headlines around the world recently reported that the first ever autonomous cargo ship has completed its first transoceanic voyage. Known as the Prism Courage, the vessel finished its 12,500 mile on June 2nd. It departed from the Gulf of Mexico before traveling through the Panama Canal and crossing the Pacific Line, ultimately ending up in South Korea's Boryong LNG terminal. Throughout the 33-day trip, the ship saved fuel using the route optimization feature, which increased efficiency by 7% and reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 5%, according to Avacus, the company that built the self-steering vessel. Thanks to its AI software, Prism Courage also avoided around 100 collisions with other ships. HD Hyundai, the parent company of Avacus, plans to continue expanding on its use of artificial intelligence for navigating both large merchant ships and leisure vessels. But it has competition from the Norwegian company Kongsberg, which plans to launch the first ever crewless cargo ship later this year. It's called the Yara Birkeland and is 100% electric. 6. The Real Troy. Homer wrote about the Trojan War in his epic poem The Iliad, but he failed to mention the Trojan horse. According to the Aeneid by Virgil, the decade-long series of conflicts ended when Odysseus ordered his army to build the famous structure. Some of the best Greek soldiers crammed into the hollow gift, and Odysseus fooled the Trojans into thinking it was a peace offering. Once inside the city walls, the Greeks emerged from the wooden horse and ravaged the Trojans, securing their victory in the seemingly endless war. For a long time, experts believed Troy was a mythical place dreamt up in Homer's mind. German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann proved them wrong during the late 19th century when he found and excavated much of the city in modern-day Turkey. The discovery posed a new question: how many of the stories about the Trojan War are true? Even after Troy's existence was proven, many scholars continued to doubt that there ever really was a Trojan horse. They thought that Virgil's reference to it was metaphorical in nature, perhaps relating to a natural disaster or a war machine, but not a big, clunky, literal wooden horse. Recently, archaeologists at Troy began digging up dozens of strangely positioned wooden planks, with each beam measuring up to 49 feet, 15 meters long. The structure fits Virgil's description of the Trojan horse, and radiocarbon dating revealed that it was built during the 12th or 11th centuries BC, which falls in line with the recorded dates for the Trojan War. So, is it the Trojan horse? Scientists haven't confirmed it, but this certainly could be the case. And it makes you wonder if there are any other true stories out there that experts have mistakenly labeled as mythical. Atlantis, perhaps? What mythical story do you think might be genuine? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. 5. The first nocturnal dinosaur. Around 65 million years ago, a strange genus of theropod dinosaurs called Shavui roamed the desert in what is now Mongolia. These creatures came from the same group of dinosaurs that gave rise to modern-day birds. The only known Shavui species is a Shavui deserti, which means desert bird. It was about half the size of a chicken, with long legs, a fragile skull, and powerful arms equipped with single claws. Scientists have long known of the species' existence, but they only recently realized that it may have been the first dinosaur to hunt at night. A team member noticed the creature's lagena, an organ that processes hearing, was unusually long. The team compared the species with CT scans of around 100 living birds and extinct dinosaurs. They also measured each species' scleral rings, which are the bones surrounding the pupils, to determine which animals were more likely to have operated in low flight. They were surprised to learn that the barn owl, a nocturnal species with excellent hearing, was the only creature with a comparably long lagena to the Shuvuya. The Shuvuya's scleral ring was large in diameter, meaning it let in a lot of light and perhaps enabled the animal to hunt in the dark. The creature's remarkable hearing helped it locate burrowing insects and small mammals. Then it seized its prey by digging in one of its two large singular claws. Several of the Shavuya's traits, including nocturnal activity, digging ability, and long hind limbs, are also seen in modern-day desert animals. The team also learned that most dinosaurs were primarily daytime creatures, and that predatory dinosaurs typically had good hearing compared to most birds, while herbivorous dinosaurs usually had poor hearing compared to most birds. 4. Illegal colonial currency. While sifting through hundreds of old coins at the Wentworth family estate in Northumberland, England recently, someone found a silver coin that was minted in Boston, Massachusetts in 1652. It was likely brought back to Britain by one of the family's ancestors, who settled in New England during the colonial era. A descendant of the settlers, named Wentworth Beaumont, took the tin full of coins to James Morton, an expert from the London-based Morton and Eden auction house. He noticed the colonial shilling right away, later recalling in a statement that he could hardly believe his eyes. One side of the coin features the letters NE for New England, and the other bears the Roman numeral XII to reflect its monetary value. Only about 40 of these shillings survive today, and the recently discovered coin is the only one to ever be certified as being in mint condition. It was illegal to mint coins in the New World. Settlers were required to trade using goods and currencies from other countries, but they faced a coin shortage, and the Massachusetts General Court commissioned silversmith John Hull to strike the shillings. The first version of the coin, which is what the Beaumont family found in their attic, was simple and easy to counterfeit, so silversmiths improved the design over time. For the next 30 years, they stamped all the coins they made with the year 1652, so that the British wouldn't suspect that there was still any minting going on. But the authorities found out anyway, and in 1682, King Charles II shut the mint down for being treasonous. The Beaumont family shilling was recently sold at auction to an anonymous buyer for $351,912. 3. Mysterious mummy. Around 800 years ago, a young adult died in Peru and was mummified before being buried near the coast. The body's preparers wrapped the corpse in cloth, put the person's hands over their face, and tied their limbs and body up with rope. These rituals were customary among the Andean cultures who lived in the region before the Incas rose to power around 1400 AD. Archaeologists recently discovered the mummy right outside the capital of Lima. The area, known as Cajamarquilla, was once home to one of the biggest and busiest pre-Hispanic settlements along the Peruvian coast. The team believes the individual was a young man who died between the ages of 25 and 30, but they have yet to confirm this. He was found in an oval-shaped tomb beneath the city square, suggesting that he was an important person, perhaps a trader who'd moved to the town from elsewhere to sell his wares. The mummy's tomb was filled with ceramics, stone tools, and other grave goods. There were also signs that people visited his burial long after he died and left offerings of meat and vegetables. The team is currently awaiting radiocarbon dating and other test results so they can get a more precise idea of when the person died and perhaps who he was to his community. 2. Our ancient relative. At least 130,000 years ago, perhaps even before then, a young woman lived and died in a remote cave in what is now Laos. Scientists unearthed one of her molars in 2018 at a site known as Cobra Cave. The tooth didn't come from a member of the modern human species known as Homo sapiens. It also didn't resemble a tooth belonging to the archaic Homo erectus species, which was one of our first ancestors to walk upright. But a closer look revealed that the molar could belong to a Denisovan, an extinct close relative of ours whose DNA has persisted into some modern-day human populations. Denisovan DNA first appeared in the Homo sapiens genetic code over 50,000 years ago, when the two species interbred. It hasn't yet been proven that the tooth belonged to a Denisovan, but so far all signs point towards this being the case. According to scientists, there's a slight chance that the molar may have come from a Neanderthal, but that is unlikely. Archaeologist Katerina Duca told CNN that it could also belong to a hybrid individual of mixed Homo sapiens and Denisovan descent, or possibly to a member of a yet unknown hominin group. But if it is a Denisovan tooth, it could help to trace the prehistoric species movement and the timeline of its interactions with modern humans. This would also be the furthest south that Denisovan remains have been found. So far, all other evidence has placed them in North Asia, yet modern genetics indicate they migrated southward at some point, and finding a Denisovan tooth in Laos would reinforce that narrative. The team that discovered the molar plans to try extracting DNA from it and to continue excavating the site where it was found, hoping to unearth more clues about our distant past. 1. The Pilldown Man. In 1912, an amateur archaeologist named Charles Dawson claimed that human-like fossils had been found in East Sussex, England. The country's top paleontologist announced that the newly discovered bones, nicknamed the Piltdown Man, belonged to a newly discovered human ancestor who lived around 500,000 years ago. Experts describe the species as the definitive missing link between humans and other primates. These claims were disproved in 1949, when new technology revealed that the remains were no more than 50,000 years old. By then, modern Homo sapiens had already emerged into existence, which meant that the Piltdown Man couldn't possibly represent a so-called missing link between humans and apes. Further investigation revealed that the fossils were from a human and some sort of ape, perhaps an orangutan, and that the artifacts had been stained to look like they matched the gravel at the site where they were supposedly discovered. It was soon determined that the Piltdown Man was nothing more than an elaborate hoax. But why would someone go so far out of their way to lead science in the wrong direction? The answer may have something to do with racism. During the late 19th century, shortly before the Piltdown Man was discovered, the first evidence that humans evolved in Africa came as Homo erectus fossils. Many Europeans apparently felt threatened by the growing body of evidence that our roots can be traced back to Africa. By creating the illusion of the Piltdown Man, scientists could claim that Britain played a prominent role in human evolution, and perhaps even white people had evolved separately from black people. While the Piltdown Man story was disproven a long time ago, it's just one example of how historical narratives are fraught with bigotry and insecurity among its overwhelmingly white body of writers. By setting these biased and sometimes entirely false stories straight, people today can get a fairer and more accurate picture of the past. Thanks for watching. Do you think there is an actual missing link between apes and humans, or do you not think it exists? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.